They told me it was training. That was the word they used, training. A simple word in any language. In mine it is asterisk vesten, the practice that costs nothing, the rehearsal before the thing that matters. We use it for younglings learning to walk the gravity decks. We use it for pilots who have never touched real fire. It is a soft word, a nursery word. I clung to that word for the first 11 minutes. Then I stopped, because there is no version of that word that explains what I watched a human do with his bare hands while his own blood ran into his eyes. But I am ahead of myself. Let me go back. Let me tell it the way it happened, slowly, so you understand how a person like me, careful, trained, certain of everything, came to throw all of that certainty away in a single afternoon on a world I had never heard of. My name is Senel. I was an observation cadet of the Coalition's 3rd Survey Wing, and I was 22 of your years old, more or less, on the day they sent me down to watch the humans. You should understand what I was first. The Coalition does not fight its own wars. It has not in a very long time. We are old. We have machines for that, beautiful, patient machines that calculate the cost of a battle before a single shot is fired and then, more often than not, decide the battle is not worth fighting. We measure. We model. We retreat from anything that does not balance on the ledger. My people, the Velhari, are proud of this. We call it wisdom. We have called it wisdom for 9,000 years. And the humans had only been part of the Coalition for 6 years. A child's age. They had come up out of their small blue world barely able to fold space, with engines that leaked heat and ships welded together like they'd been built in a hurry by people who were angry at the metal. The senior species laughed at them quietly, in the polite way old powers laugh at the young. We let them in because the charter said we must let anyone in who could reach the table, but nobody expected much. You could feel it in the council halls. The humans were a curiosity. A footnote. A species that still buried its dead in the ground instead of giving them to the stars. I had been assigned to study them. That was my whole purpose. Observe, record, file. I was to spend a rotation embedded with a human defensive unit on a fringe world called Cora's Reach, watch their so-called combat drills, and write an honest assessment of whether the human military was worth the resources the Coalition spent feeding it. My supervisor, Counselor Davith, briefed me the day before the drop. He was 300 years old and smelled faintly of the dried bark tea the elders drink. He had small, kind eyes and a way of speaking slowly, like every word had been weighed twice before it left him. You will see them play at war, he told me. It is theater mostly. The humans put on these exercises to feel important. They simulate an attack, they run about, they shout. It is loud and it is harmless. Watch it, note it. Try not to be charmed. They are very good at being charming when they want something. He paused. And Senel, do not get attached. We rotate observers for a reason. The ones who stay too long start to think like them. It rots the judgment. I told him I understood. I did not understand anything. Cora's Reach was a hard world. Cold. The kind of cold that gets into the seams of your suit and sits there. It had 2 suns, both small and white and far away, so the light never quite warmed anything. It only made everything sharp. Sharp shadows. Sharp wind that came off the salt flats in the east and cut sideways across the outpost. There was a smell I couldn't place for the longest time, mineral and bitter, and later I learned it was the dust. The whole planet was covered in fine gray dust that got into everything. The humans had a word for it that they used like a curse. They called it the grit. The outpost was small. 80-some humans, a handful of support drones, a few of those welded-together ships parked under camouflage netting that didn't seem to do much. It sat on a ridge above a wide, shallow valley, and beyond the valley were the mountains, and the whole place felt like the very last edge of somewhere. Which, I would learn, it was. I came down in the morning planetary time. The shuttle set me on the landing pad, and I stepped out into that knife wind, and the first human I saw was a woman leaning against a fuel drum, drinking something hot from a metal cup, watching me come. She was not impressed. I want you to understand that because it set the tone for everything. In my whole life, every other species I had ever met had been impressed by the coalition. The uniform, the clean lines of it, the authority. They straightened up. They were careful. The humans, this human, just looked at me over the rim of her cup with an expression I would come to know very well, a kind of tired, amused patience, like she had seen 100 things stranger than me, and most of them had been her own fault. "You the Watcher," she said, not a question. "I am Observation Cadet Senel of the 3rd. "Yeah," she drank. "Voss, Sergeant, try not to die out here, Watcher, the paperwork's a nightmare." And she turned and walked off, and I stood there in the cold not knowing if I had been insulted or welcomed. Sergeant Dana Voss. I have written her name perhaps 1,000 times since then in my reports, my appeals, my testimony. I have written it in the dark when I could not sleep. I will write it again now. Voss, remember her. She matters more than I do in this story. The first 2 days were exactly what David said they would be. Theater. I followed the humans around with my recorder and watched them do drills. They ran patterns across the valley floor in their bulky gray armor, practicing what they called overlapping fields of fire. They shouted at each other in a clipped, harsh way that I mistook at first for anger and later understood was simply how they talked when things mattered. They cleaned their weapons obsessively, sitting in circles in the evening, taking the guns apart and putting them back together while they argued about food and family, and someone named Reyes who had apparently lost a great deal of money on something called a bet. I noted all of it. Subjects display low efficiency, redundant training behaviors, emotional volatility high, resource discipline poor. I am ashamed to say, a little bored. There was a boy, they were all young, but he was younger, maybe 19, named Eli Marsh. Skinny, with hands too big for his arms, the way the young of fast-growing species often are. He took to following me around. He was curious about everything. He asked me what my world looked like, whether I had family, whether it was true the Velhari could see in the dark. He asked if my species felt fear the same way humans did. "We feel it," I told him. "We simply have the discipline to act correctly despite it. That is the difference between an old species and a young one." He thought about that, then he grinned. "So you do get scared, you just don't admit it," and he wandered off pleased with himself before I could correct him. I did not like Eli Marsh at first. He was undisciplined. He laughed too much. He gave away the small, sweet ration cubes the humans treasured, just gave them to whoever looked tired, which struck me as wasteful. I wrote a note about it. Subject Marsh demonstrates poor resource hoarding instinct, likely to be selected against. I am keeping that note. I keep all my notes from those days. I read them sometimes the way you'd press on a bruise. On the 3rd day, the warning came. I was in the command tent when it happened, watching Voss and the lieutenant, a quiet, heavy-set man named Tomas Okonkwo who never raised his voice, argue over a supply manifest. A drone chimed. Voss looked at the readout, and I watched something change in her face. It was very small, a stillness like a pond when the wind dies all at once. "How long?" she said. The drone answered in its flat voice. Something about an unscheduled gravity displacement at the system edge. A mass, multiple masses decelerating. I did not understand the significance. I was an observer. I had been told this was a training rotation. So when Voss looked up and her eyes found me across the tent, I assumed she was about to explain some new drill. "Watcher," she said, "you picked a hell of a week." The mass at the system edge was a Thren raiding fleet. You may not know the Thren. The Coalition prefers not to speak of them. They are not part of the table. They never were. They are an old enemy from before the Coalition was the Coalition, a species that does not negotiate and does not stop and does not, as far as anyone has ever determined, want anything except the ending of other things. We had pushed them to the rim long ago. With our beautiful patient machines and our careful calculations, we thought them mostly gone, a border problem, a rumor. There were 9 Thren vessels decelerating toward Korra's reach, and the entire defense of the planet, the entire defense, was 80-some humans on a ridge, 3 welded-together ships, and 1 Velhari observation cadet who had been told, very clearly, that this was training. I went to find the communication array. I remember walking very fast and feeling very calm, which is its own kind of fear, the calm that comes when the thing happening is too large to feel all at once. I was going to call the coalition. I was going to request the immediate dispatch of a real defensive fleet. This was a fringe world, but it was a asterisk coalition asterisk world, and the charter was clear, and surely. Counselor Davith's face appeared on the array. There was a delay on the signal, the long lag of deep space, so our conversation happened in slow, heavy pieces, each of us waiting through the silence. I told him what was coming. I requested the fleet. He was quiet for the length of the lag, and then longer, and when he answered, his kind old eyes would not quite meet the lens. "Senel," he said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. A fleet is not coming." I asked him to repeat it. I told myself I had misheard through the static. "The models have run," he said, slow as ever, each word weighed twice. "Cora's reach is not defensible against a force that size, not in the time we would need to reach it. To send ships would be to lose them. The coalition does not lose ships in battles it cannot win. You know this. You were taught this. It is the wisdom that has kept us alive for 9,000 years. A pause, the lag, the static. The world will fall. The garrison is lost. I am sorry you are there to see it. We will arrange your extraction before the Thren reach orbit. The shuttle will come for you tonight. Only for you, Senel. Do you understand? Only for you. You are coalition. They are not your concern." I understood the words. Each word was a soft word, a reasonable word. They balanced perfectly on the ledger. I want to tell you that I refused him right there, that I stood up straight and threw the wisdom of 9,000 years back in his face. I did not. I was 22. I was afraid. I said quietly that I understood, and I closed the channel, and I sat in the dust by the dead array, and I thought, they are going to leave them, all of them, the boy who gives away his sweets. They are going to leave them to die because the math says so. And then I did something I had never done in my entire careful life. I went and found Sergeant Voss, and I told her the truth. She was in the vehicle bay, checking the seals on a weapon I didn't recognize, and she listened to the whole thing without stopping what she was doing. No fleet, no rescue, a shuttle coming tonight for me alone. The coalition had already written Cora's reach into the lost column and moved on. When I finished, she set the weapon down. She didn't look angry. That was the thing I couldn't get past. I had expected rage. I had braced for it. Instead, she just nodded slowly, like I had confirmed something she'd suspected for a long time. "Yeah," she said. "Figured it'd be something like that." You know. "I know how your people do math, Watcher." She wiped her hands on a rag. "We've known since you let us in. Coalition's happy to have us at the table as long as nothing's on fire. The second something burns," she shrugged. "We're the fringe. Fringe is what you spend when you're not willing to spend the center." "Then why are you here? Why defend a world that won't be reinforced? The math." "Yeah, see, that's your whole problem." She finally looked at me, and there was something in her face that I had no word for in my language or any I knew. "You keep doing the math. You did the math, and the math said run, so you'll run, and you'll feel real reasonable about it the whole way home." She picked the weapon back up. "We did the same math, came out the same. World can't be held. We're all gonna die here." She racked the slide. "And we're staying anyway." I asked her, and I can still hear how small my voice was. I asked her why. She thought about it. She actually thought about it like nobody had asked her before. "There's people behind us," she said finally. "Down in the valley settlements, couple thousand, farmers mostly, kids they can't fight and they can't run far. If we hold this ridge, the evac transports get maybe 10 hours to load them up and run for the jump point before the Thren punch through." She looked out at the gray valley, the sharp white light. 10 hours, that's the whole job. We're not holding the planet, Watcher. We never thought we could. We're holding 10 hours. She turned back to me. "Now. Your shuttle's coming tonight. You should be on it. This isn't your fight and I'm not gonna pretend it is. Go home, tell your council whatever you want. A small, hard smile. Just when you write it up, get the names right. People like to know somebody got the names right. And she went back to her work, and she did not look at me again, because as far as she was concerned, the conversation was over and I was already gone. I went back to my quarters. I packed my recorder and my few belongings. I sat on the bunk and I waited for night and the shuttle that would carry me away, the only one of all of us the coalition had decided was worth saving. Outside, I could hear the humans working. They worked all afternoon and into the dark. They didn't panic. That was the strangest thing, the thing my training had no slot for. They knew exactly what was coming. They had done the math, the same math I had, and it ended with all of them dead, and they did not panic. They dug. They hauled. Somewhere someone was laughing at something. I heard Eli Marsh's voice, that bright, undisciplined laugh carrying across the cold. I thought about David's words, they are not your concern, you are coalition. I thought about 10 hours, and a couple thousand farmers and kids who couldn't run far. I thought about a species 6 years old that had done the math, seen its own death written plain, and decided to stay and buy time for strangers with the only currency it had. The shuttle came at the 18th hour. I heard it descend, that clean coalition engine, no leak in it, no anger in the metal. I heard it set down on the pad. I heard the ramp lower and the pilot's voice come over the local channel, calling for observation Cadet Sentinel, requesting immediate boarding, departure window closing. I stood up, I picked up my bag. And then I put it down again. I cannot tell you it was a noble decision, made with a clear head. It was not. I did not decide it the way I'd been taught to decide things, with the ledger and the model and the cool weighing of cost. I decided it in my chest, somewhere below thought, in a place my people had spent 9,000 years teaching themselves to ignore. I decided it the way Voss had decided it, and Marsh, and Okonkwo, and all 80-some of them out there in the dark, digging. The shuttle called for me 3 times. Then the window closed. I heard the ramp lift and the engine spin up and that clean, perfect machine rise off the pad and climb away into the cold black sky, empty. I watched it go from the doorway of my quarters, the last way home, leaving without me. Behind me in the dark, a human voice said, "Huh." I turned around. It was Voss. She'd seen the shuttle leave. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never gotten from her or anyone, surprise, real surprise, and under it something that might have been respect, though I was too inexperienced then to be sure. "Watcher," she said slowly, "what the hell did you just do?" I tried to find the coalition words for it. The careful words, the weighed twice words. I couldn't find a single one. So I said the only true thing I had. "You said to get the names right." I swallowed. I thought I should be here to see them, all of them, up close. She looked at me for a long moment in the dark. The wind cut between us. Far off, the white suns were going down behind the mountains, and the first of the Thren ships was a new hard star low on the horizon, growing. Then Dana Voss did something I will remember until the day I die. She reached out and she put one human hand on my shoulder. The first time any of them had touched me, and she gripped it hard, the way I would later learn they grip each other before something terrible. "Okay then," she said. "Welcome to the war, Sentinel." A breath. "Let's go get you a weapon you can actually hold." And we walked out together into the cold, toward the ridge, toward the 10 hours, toward the thing I had been so certain was only ever going to be training. I had 11 minutes left of believing that word meant anything. They were the last 11 minutes of the person I used to be. The weapon they gave me was too heavy. That's the first thing I remember about the ridge. Not fear, not yet. Just the weight of the thing in my hands, a human rifle they'd modified to fit my grip, and a boy named Eli Marsh kneeling beside me in the dust at midnight, showing me how to hold it so the kick wouldn't break my shoulder. "Tuck it in," he kept saying. "Tuck it in, see, against the meat here, not the bone." He moved my arm with his big, clumsy hands. He was patient with me the way you're patient with something small that doesn't understand it's in danger. There. Now you don't gotta be good. You just gotta point it the right way and not shoot any of us. Think you can do that? I told him I thought I could. He grinned in the dark. His face was filthy already, smeared with the grit, and his helmet was too big and his hands were too big, and he was 19 years old and he was going to die in a few hours, and he grinned at me like we were sharing a joke. Cool, he said. Hey, watcher Senel, you scared? I considered lying. I was very tired of lying all at once. Yes, I said. Yeah, he said. Me too, that's normal. My Sarge says scared just means you understand the situation. He checked his own weapon, that obsessive ritual I'd noted and dismissed 3 days ago as wasteful. I understood it now. It wasn't ritual. It was the only thing left he could control. Voss says you gave up your ride home. I did. He was quiet a moment. The wind cut between us. Down in the valley, very far below, I could see the lights of the evac transports loading the settlements. Tiny moving sparks, families and farmers and children stumbling through the dark toward the jump point. The people we were going to die for, and most of whom would never know our names. That was a dumb thing to do, Eli said finally. There was no insult in it, it was almost gentle, real dumb. He bumped my shoulder with his. Glad you're here, though. I have thought about that exchange more than almost any other in my life. That was a dumb thing to do. Glad you're here, though. My whole people, 9,000 years of us, and we had never once managed to hold those two thoughts together. The math and the gladness, the cost and the staying. The humans did it without even noticing, a boy in the dark in a sentence before a battle he knew he couldn't win. They came down out of the sky 3 hours before dawn. I had seen Thren vessels in training simulations, clean diagrams, threat assessment renderings in calm coalition blue. Nothing prepares you. They came in low over the mountains, and they were wrong in a way I felt in my teeth before I understood it with my eyes, the way they moved, too fast and too smooth, no leak, no hesitation, machines built by something that had spent its entire existence perfecting the act of ending things. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't hail. They came in silence, and the first I knew the battle had begun was when the eastern emplacement, 40 meters from where I crouched, simply ceased to exist. There was no sound at first. That's a thing nobody tells you. The first strike was so fast it outran its own noise. One instant there were 6 humans at that emplacement. I knew 2 of their names. I'd watched them argue about food the night before. And the next instant there was a column of fire and a hole in the world. And then, a full second later, the sound arrived and knocked me flat into the dust. I lay there. The grit was in my mouth. My ears were ringing a high, thin note, and in the firelight I saw the humans get up. That's the part I came back to tell you. Out of everything, that's the part. They got up. The emplacement was gone, their friends were gone, the air itself was on fire, and along the ridge all down the line in the red light, the humans were already up and moving and shouting and pouring fire back up into that descending wrong-shaped death. No panic. No freezing. I had crouched there frozen, a member of a species 9,000 years old, certain of everything, and the children got up faster than I did. What followed I do not have the words for. I have tried. In every report, every retelling, I run out of language and have to stop. The coalition trained me to call combat an asterisk exchange of force asterisk. Clean words. Force is exchanged. The side with the better model prevails. The ledger balances. That is what war was to me. A calculation made loud. What I watched on that ridge was not an exchange of force. It was something my people had deliberately, carefully forgotten how to do. It was 80-some bodies deciding, individually, in real time, again and again, to put themselves between the dark and the strangers behind them, and to keep doing it after it stopped making any sense, after the math had collapsed, after every model said flee asterisk. I watched Lieutenant Okonkwo, quiet, heavyset, never raised his voice, walk upright through fire to drag a wounded soldier out of a collapsing trench, And when a second strike took his arm off below the elbow, he did not scream and he did not stop. He shifted his grip. He kept dragging. He got the man to cover, and then he tied off his own arm with a strap held in his teeth and picked his weapon back up with his remaining hand and went back to the line. I recorded all of it. My hands were shaking so badly the footage is nearly useless. He was not a large man made larger by rage. That's the thing. He was calm. He did the most impossible thing I had ever seen, and he did it the way you do a chore. I asked him later, much later, in the few quiet minutes we had, how he kept going. He looked at me like he didn't understand the question. Marcus was in that trench, he said, as if that explained it, as if a name was a reason, as if a name was the only reason that had ever existed. The Thren made landfall before dawn. Ground troops, and here is where the title I have carried all these years comes from, the thing I told the council, the thing they could not forgive me for saying out loud. They told me to observe humans. They told me I would see training. What I saw was not training. There is no soft nursery word for what I saw. I saw slaughter. But not the slaughter you are imagining. Not the humans being slaughtered, though they were, one by one, all down that line. I mean the other thing. The thing the coalition will not name. I saw what humans do when they have already accepted that they are going to die, and the only thing left to decide is how much they will cost. The Thren came across the valley floor expecting the math. They are an old enemy. They have fought the coalition for longer than my species has had ships. They know the math. They know that when a force is beaten, it breaks. Always. Every species the coalition has ever known, when the model collapses and death is certain, breaks and runs, because that is the rational thing, that is the wisdom. The Thren came expecting us to break. We did not break. I say we asterisk. I had been there 4 days. But I say we asterisk, and I will say it until I die, because somewhere in that long red night I stopped being an observer and became one of them. And there is no taking that back, and I would not take it back. The humans did not break. They held the ridge, and when the ridge could not be held, they fell back to the second line and held that. And when that failed, they fell back again, slower each time, bleeding the Thren for every meter, and they did not run, and they did not surrender, and they did not stop being human even as there were fewer and fewer of them to be it. I fired my too heavy weapon. I will not pretend I was any good. Eli was right, I just pointed it the right way and didn't hit any of us. But I fired, and I reloaded, and somewhere in there I stopped being afraid in the frozen way and became afraid in the human way, the way that moves, the way that does the thing anyway. I saw Sergeant Voss save my life. A Thren soldier came over the rubble 3 meters from me, and I froze again, old habit, deep habit, 9,000 years deep, and Voss put herself between it and me without a half-second of hesitation. She did not calculate. She did not weigh my worth against hers on any ledger. She simply moved, the way water moves downhill, the way it was the most natural thing in the universe to put her body between the dark and a 4-day-old alien who had given up his only ride home. She took a wound doing it that I knew, even then, even with my poor understanding of human anatomy, was bad, low on the side. She didn't fall. She finished what she'd started, and then she turned and looked at me, and her face was gray, and she said, almost annoyed, "Tuck it in, Watcher, against the meat. Marsh teach you nothing." And I started to laugh and cry at the same time, both at once, a thing my species cannot easily do. And she grinned at me with blood on her teeth, and that was the moment. If you want to know the exact moment, that was when the person I used to be finished dying, and the person I am now finished being born. The hours bled. I lost track of them. The white sun started to come up behind the smoke, that sharp cold light filtering through the haze, and the valley below was almost empty now. The last evac transports were lifting, tiny sparks climbing toward the jump point. The strangers getting away, the whole job, the 10 hours, almost bought. Almost. We were down to perhaps 20 by then, maybe fewer. The line had collapsed back to the outpost itself, the place I'd landed 4 days ago and found Voss unimpressed by me over a metal cup. There was no perimeter anymore. There was just a ragged knot of humans and one alien around the command tent, and the Thren closing in from 3 sides, and the transports not quite gone. And Okonkwo, one-armed, gray-faced, did the math out loud for all of us, the last math in his quiet voice that never raised. "Transports need 8 more minutes to clear the gravity well," he said. "We can't hold 8 minutes here, not all of us, not anymore." He looked around the knot of us. "But the Thren want this hill more than they want those transports. They always go for the hill, it's how they think, so," he breathed. "Somebody draws them, pulls hard, makes a lot of noise, makes them want it, buys the 8 minutes, a pause. It's a one-way trip. I'm not gonna order it, I'm asking." I have replayed the next 4 seconds 10,000 times. Nobody hesitated. Nobody. Eli Marsh's hand went up first, 19 years old, too big helmet, the boy who gave away his sweets, and then Voss's, low on her wounded side, and then 4 others, and then Okonkwo's one remaining hand. And then, before I had decided anything at all, before the math, before the weighing, before the wisdom of 9,000 years could open its mouth, my hand was up too. Voss saw it. She reached over and pushed my arm back down, gently, firmer than gentle. "No," she said, "not you." I stayed, I said. "I'm one of." "You're the one who tells it," she said, and her gray face was very close to mine, her voice very low under the noise. "That's your job now, Watcher. You don't draw them, you get on the last transport and you live and you go back to your shiny council and you tell them what you saw here, names and all." Her grip on my arm, hard the way they grip each other. "You're not staying to die, Senel. You're staying to remember asterisk. That's harder. And it's the only thing we can't do ourselves." A breath. Blood on her teeth. Somebody's gotta get the names right. And Eli Marsh, already standing, already moving toward the front, toward the dark, toward the thing he knew was coming. Eli Marsh turned back and looked at me one last time, and he grinned, that bright, undisciplined laugh of a grin, the most wasteful and the most beautiful thing my careful species has no word for, and he said, "Glad you were here, Watcher." Then they went out to draw the dark down on themselves so that strangers could live, and I did not go with them, because I had been given the one human job I was allowed to keep. I had been given the names. The last transport had not been meant for me. It was a wounded evac craft, half-loaded with the few humans too broken to fight and not yet dead, and it had stayed on the pad past every sane window because the pilot, a woman named Kari with a burned face and a voice gone to gravel, had refused to lift while the line still held. When Voss shoved my arm down and gave me the names, it was Kari's craft she meant, the last way off Korra's reach. I did not want to go. I need you to understand that, because for a long time afterward I could not forgive myself for going. I stood on that pad in the cold dawn light with the smoke rolling and the Thren fire walking closer, and every part of me that had become human in the night wanted to run the other way, toward Eli and Voss and Okonkwo, toward the front, toward the dark they had gone to draw down on themselves. To die with them. It would have been easy. Dying with people is so much easier than living without them. Nobody tells you that either. But Voss had given me a job, and I had spent my whole life keeping to my assignments, and for once in my life the assignment was the right one, and so I climbed the ramp of Kari's craft with my recorder full of names, and I did the hardest thing I have ever done, which was nothing, which was leave. The ramp came up. The engine spun, leaking angry, beautiful human metal, and we lifted off the pad, and through the closing gap I saw the ridge one last time. I saw the knot of them out front, so small now, so few, muzzle flashes in the smoke, drawing the whole weight of the Thren assault onto themselves and away from the climbing transports. I saw them holding. I saw them buying the minutes. I could not see faces. I did not need to. I knew the names. And then the smoke took it, and we were climbing, and below us Korra's reach fell away gray and burning. And somewhere down there the bravest people I have ever known were spending the last of themselves on strangers who would never know they existed. The transports made the jump point, all of them, Every settlement craft, every farmer and child and frightened family, everyone got clear of the gravity well and folded out into the black and lived. 2,311 people. I learned the exact number later. I learned it the way I learn everything now. Carefully, by name where I can. 8 minutes. Okonkwo had said they needed 8 minutes. The garrison bought them 11. None of the garrison survived. I want to say that plainly, with no soft words around it, because soft words are what my people use to make unbearable things sit quietly on a ledger, and I am done with that. 83 humans went down to Korra's Reach to hold a ridge they knew they could not hold, and 0 came back, and in exchange 2,311 strangers are alive in the galaxy who would otherwise be ash. The math my people taught me has a name for that. It calls it a asterisk net loss asterisk. 83 assets expended, the world lost anyway, no strategic position gained. The model that Counselor David ran, the model that decided not to send the fleet, that same model, run on what the garrison did, returns the word waste. Inefficient, irrational, the behavior of a species too young to know better. I have learned to hate that model with a completeness I did not know my heart could hold. The extraction shuttle found Kari's transport at the jump point, and they peeled me off it, asterisk only you, Senel, you are coalition, and they brought me home through the long, cold dark, and I sat in that clean, unleaking Velhari shuttle for the whole passage, and I did not say a word, and I did not let go of my recorder, not once, not to sleep, not to eat. The names. I had the names. Counselor David met me himself. His kind old eyes, his smell of dried bark tea. He was so relieved to see me. He took my hands in his and told me how glad he was that I had made it out, how the loss of Korra's Reach was a tragedy but a necessary one, how I had performed my function admirably, and my observations would be most valuable, how in time I would understand that the wisdom of 9,000 years is wisdom precisely, because it does not flinch from hard arithmetic. He told me not to be too affected. He told me the ones who stay too long start to think like them, and it rots the judgment. I looked at this old, gentle, decent person who had taught me everything I knew, and I understood that he was not a coward and not a monster. That was the worst part. He was kind. He genuinely grieved the garrison. He simply could not see them. He had spent so long looking at the ledger that he had forgotten there were names on it, that every figure in the lost column had given away sweets in the dark to whoever looked tired, had argued about food, had a sergeant who wanted somebody to get the names right. I gave my testimony to the full survey council 9 days later. I had prepared a report, the proper kind, threat assessment, force disposition, tactical analysis, recommendations. I had it all ready, weighed twice, every word. I stood up in that great calm hall in front of the oldest and wisest members of my species, and I opened my mouth to give them the report. And I could not do it. I stood there in the silence, and I looked at all those patient ancient faces waiting for me to confirm what they already knew, that the humans were a curiosity, brave perhaps but irrational, a footnote, a species too young to understand the wisdom of retreat. And I thought about Eli Marsh's grin, and Okonkwo dragging a man with one arm because Marcus was in that trench, and Voss putting her body between the dark and a 4-day-old alien without doing the math, because there is no math, because some things are below the math, in a place we taught ourselves to stop feeling 9,000 years ago and called it wisdom. So I put the report down, and instead I read them the names. All 83, first name, surname, age where I knew it, and one true thing about each one. It took a long time. The council grew restless and then uncomfortable and then very, very quiet. I read them Dana Voss, Sergeant, who wanted nothing in her last hours except for somebody to get the names right. I read them Tomas Okonkwo, Lieutenant, who never raised his voice and went back into the fire for a name. I read them Eli Marsh, 19 years old, who gave away his sweet ration cubes to whoever looked tired, which I had once filed as a poor survival instinct likely to be selected against. and which I now understand was the single most advanced thing I have ever witnessed any species do. When I finished, an elder of the council, older than Davith, older than the charter, asked me, not unkindly, what my point was. What was the asterisk recommendation? What did 83 names asterisk prove? And I told them. I told them that the Thren came to Korra's reach expecting the math. That the Thren have beaten us, again and again, across history, in every place where we ran the model, and the model said retreat asterisk, because the Thren understand our wisdom better than we do, and they have built their entire ancient strategy around the certainty that a beaten coalition force will always, always break. I told them that for 9,000 years we have called our retreat wisdom, and the Thren have called it asterisk predictable, and they are the same word. And then I told them that on Korra's reach, the Thren met a force that did the math, saw it come out die, and stayed anyway. And the Thren did not have a model for that. They had never needed one. It cost them. It cost them so much more than 83 humans should ever have been able to cost them, because you cannot calculate against a thing that has stopped calculating. You cannot outmodel a creature that has set the model down and decided to simply cost you everything it has. The humans are not irrational, I told the council. That is the mistake. That is the mistake that will end us. They are not children who don't understand the math. They understand it perfectly. They simply refuse to let it be the last word. I looked at Davith. His kind old eyes would not meet mine, just as they had not met the lens when he told me no fleet was coming. They have something we sold off for safety 9,000 years ago and have been congratulating ourselves on the profit ever since. And the day is coming. It is coming, elders. The Thren are not gone. They are asterisk learning. The day is coming when this entire coalition will need to remember how to do what 83 humans did on a dust ridge for 2,000 strangers. And on that day, the only ones among us who will know how are the ones we keep calling a footnote. The hall was silent for a long time. They did not adopt my recommendation. I want to be honest with you all the way to the end. They thanked me for my service. They noted that the observer had become emotionally compromised through prolonged proximity asterisk, exactly as the rotation policy was designed to prevent, and they reassigned me away from human contact, and they filed my testimony in a place where testimony goes to be quiet. Davith told me gently that I would feel differently in time, that the rot would heal, that I would come back to the wisdom. I never did, I never will. I left the survey wing. I left a great deal behind, and I have spent every year since doing the only job I was ever truly given, the job a dying woman with blood on her teeth pressed into my arm in the smoke. I remember. I get the names right. I have stood before every audience that would have me and many that did not want me, and I have read the 83 names, and I have told this story exactly as it happened, and I will keep telling it until I am ash, because the humans cannot tell it themselves and somebody has to. And on a cold ridge under 2 white suns, a sergeant decided that somebody would be me. People ask me sometimes after, they ask me what the humans are like. Members of my own species, mostly, the young ones, the ones not yet fully sold on the wisdom. They want me to sum it up. They want a clean line they can carry. I tell them this. They told me to observe humans. They told me I would see training, theater, harmless, a young species playing at a thing it didn't understand. And for 3 days that is exactly what I saw, and I wrote it down, and I was a little bored, and I was certain of everything. The way you can only be certain when you have never once watched the math come out die and looked it in the face. What I saw was not training. It was 83 people deciding in the dark, with no fleet coming and no name in any history that would remember them, that strangers they would never meet were worth more than the arithmetic of their own survival. It was a thing my ancient, careful, brilliant people forgot how to do so long ago that we no longer have a word for it. And I have searched every language I know and I cannot find one, so I will use theirs. They called it asterisk holding the line. I call it the bravest thing in the galaxy and the most human, and I was there, 4 days an observer and one night a soldier, and I got the names right. I always get the names right. That is the whole job now. That is the only wisdom I have left.